The human fleet had once been proud, strong, and full of confidence as it traveled across the stars. Now it drifted through space like a broken caravan. Each ship damaged in a different way. Some had lost engines, some had lost weapons, and others had lost entire sections of their hull. The flagship, called Resolute, was the only ship still holding formation, though barely. Sparks flew behind its engines, and its metal surface was marked by deep scars from battle. Captain Mara Vasquez stood on the command deck, watching the stars through the main viewport. She looked tired but calm. Around her, the crew worked quietly, focused on keeping systems alive. Warning lights blinked in soft red and orange colors, and every few minutes another alarm sounded, reminding them how close they were to total failure. The battle that broke them had happened only days before. No one fully understood the alien force that attacked them. The enemy ships moved like shadows, fast and silent, striking with powerful energy beams that cut through shields like paper. Humanity had fought back with courage, but the cost had been heavy. Many ships were lost, and the survivors were forced into a desperate jump through unknown space. Now they were stranded near a harsh, rocky planet with thick storms covering its surface. The fleet had no choice but to land. One by one, damaged ships entered the atmosphere, shaking violently as they fought against gravity and wind. The Resolute landed last, sliding across dark ground before coming to a stop with a loud metal groan. Silence filled the air after the engines shut down. For a moment, no one moved. Then the crew slowly began to breathe again, realizing they were still alive. Outside, the planet looked empty and cold. Tall cliffs rose in the distance, and dust storms moved across the flatland like waves. The sky was gray, and the sun appeared weak behind heavy clouds. It was not a welcoming world, but it offered something they needed badly: time. Engineers rushed to inspect damage as soon as the ramps lowered. They carried tools, scanners, and boxes filled with spare parts. Some parts were real replacements. Others were random pieces taken from destroyed ships. Humanity had learned long ago that survival often depended on creativity rather than perfection. Chief Engineer Lan Park walked under the belly of the Resolute, looking at broken panels and exposed wires. He shook his head slowly, but smiled anyway. "She's not dead yet," he said to a nearby technician. "As long as she's not dead, we can fix her." The technician laughed nervously. "Fix her with what?" "We're running out of everything." Leon tapped a damaged section of metal with a wrench. "Hope, duct tape, and percussive maintenance," he said, raising the wrench again and hitting a loose panel until it settled into place. The system lights above him flickered and then turned green. A small victory made nearby crew members cheer. Inside the ship, Captain Mara moved through the corridors, checking on her people. She spoke with injured soldiers resting in medical bays and thanked engineers working long hours without sleep. She knew morale mattered as much as repairs. If hope faded, the fleet would fall apart long before the ships did. Communications Officer Talia called her to the bridge later that day. "Captain, we're receiving signals," she said. "Not from our ships. Something else." Mara leaned closer to the console. Strange patterns filled the screen, repeating in complex waves. The signal did not match any known language. It felt almost alive, changing shape as they watched. "Is it the enemy?" Mara asked quietly. Talia hesitated. "I don't know. It's coming from somewhere on the planet's surface." The crew exchanged worried looks. Landing had been risky enough. Now there was proof they were not alone. Mara made her decision quickly. "We focus on repairs first. No panic, no guessing. We survive today. Then we figure out tomorrow." Outside, teams began building small camps between landed ships. They shared power cables and spare materials, connecting vessels together like a family trying to stay close. Some soldiers stood guard while others helped engineers, proving that in hard times, everyone worked together. At night, the storms grew louder and the wind howled against metal hulls. Inside the Resolute, lights dimmed to save energy. The crew gathered in small groups, telling stories, sharing food, and laughing softly despite everything. It was not forced happiness. It was the kind that came from knowing they had survived something terrible. Mara returned to the command deck and watched the dark sky through the viewport. Somewhere out there, the alien enemy might be searching for them. Somewhere on the planet, unknown signals waited to be understood. The fleet was broken, fragile, and far from home. But humanity had never needed perfect conditions to survive. As long as they had hands to repair, minds to think, and hearts that refused to give up, there was still a chance. And for now, chance was enough. The days that followed were filled with long hours of hard work and little sleep. The crew of the Resolute had barely started repairing the ship when they were faced with more problems. Despite their best efforts, the damage was severe. Every time they fixed one issue, another seemed to appear. Yet, they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Their lives depended on it. Captain Mara Vasquez spent her days moving between the engineers, soldiers, and the rest of the crew. She made sure everyone was doing something useful, no matter how small. She spoke with the engineers about repairs, the soldiers about keeping watch, and the medics about how their injured were doing. She had no time to feel afraid. If the crew saw her faltering, they might lose their will to fight, and Mara couldn't let that happen. The storm outside had grown worse. Lightning flashed across the sky and rain hammered against the hulls of the damaged ships. The planet's surface, rocky and barren, was filled with jagged mountains in the distance. It was as if the world itself was warning them to leave. But the fleet couldn't leave. They had no choice but to stay and repair the ships, hoping they could eventually escape. The communications team was busy picking up strange signals again. They couldn't make sense of them, but they seemed to be coming from deep beneath the planet's surface. Talia, the communications officer, told Mara that it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't an enemy broadcast. It wasn't even a distress call. It was something else entirely, like a message, but in a language none of them understood. Mara stared at the screen where the signals were being displayed. The patterns of the message were rhythmic and repetitive. It seemed almost alive, growing and shrinking in strange ways. Whoever, or whatever, was sending it was clearly trying to communicate. But with what intent? That was the question that kept everyone awake at night. As repairs continued, Mara called a meeting with the senior officers. They needed a plan. The crew had been working non-stop for days, and the strain was starting to show. The ship's hull was patched up, but the engines were another matter. They needed more parts, and there was nothing left to scavenge from the other ships. To make things worse, the damaged parts they had managed to recover were old, worn, and unreliable. Leon Park, the chief engineer, had been working without rest. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands covered in grease, but he refused to stop. He knew the only chance they had was to keep going.
"We need more resources," he said, wiping sweat from his brow.
The systems are holding together for now, but it won't last forever. If we don't get something stronger, we won't make it off this planet. Mara nodded, but deep inside, she feared they were running out of time. The storm outside wasn't just a natural occurrence. It was as if the planet itself was pushing them back. They were alone. No help was coming. And yet, every time they thought they couldn't do more, someone would find a solution. It was then that a scout team returned from a mission. They had gone out to explore the planet, looking for anything that might help them. Spare parts, shelter, or even a sign of life. They came back with news. There was a structure, a ruin, about a day's journey away, hidden beneath the planet's surface. It wasn't just a simple building. The scout team believed it might be a part of an ancient alien civilization, possibly connected to the signals they had been receiving. Mara's heart skipped a beat. This could be the key to saving them, or it could be another danger they couldn't handle. She didn't hesitate. She knew they had to take the risk. The next morning, a small team of engineers and soldiers, including Mara herself, set out for the ruins. The journey was difficult. The wind howled and the rain made the ground slippery. The storm made it almost impossible to see, but the group pushed on. The thought of finding something that could turn the tide kept them going, even when every step felt like it might be their last. As they neared the ruins, the landscape started to change. The jagged rocks and dusty ground gave way to something strange. Smooth surfaces and walls that looked too perfect to be natural. The architecture was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. There were strange symbols etched into the walls, glowing faintly, even though the sky was darkened by the storm. The group carefully moved through the ruins, scanning for any signs of danger. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Every sound seemed to echo, and every step felt like it might trigger something hidden in the shadows. It was clear this was no ordinary building. The ruins seemed ancient, but there was something very alive about them, as if the place had been waiting for something, or someone. They found a chamber deep within the ruins. In the center, an object stood. It was not like anything the humans had ever seen. It was glowing softly, and its shape seemed to shift depending on how the light hit it. It looked like a relic, but at the same time, it felt alive. It was at that moment that they realized the signals they had been hearing weren't just random noise. They were coming from this very object. It was communicating with them. The team tried to make sense of the symbols in the shifting light, but before they could do more, a voice, low and echoing, filled the chamber. It wasn't human, but it was unmistakably clear. The message was simple. Help is coming. Mara's heart raced. This was no longer just about surviving. It was about something much bigger. The object, which had once seemed like a relic of an ancient civilization, now felt like a lifeline. Its soft glow pulsed in time with the strange signals that filled the air. Every time the light shifted, the symbols etched on the walls of the chamber seemed to respond, moving like a living thing. The crew watched in awe, some taking notes while others stared at the object, trying to make sense of the mystery. Chief Engineer Leon Park was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. This isn't just a relic. It's a signal. He ran his fingers along the smooth surface of the object, his mind working through possibilities. It's like a beacon. But who is it for? And why is it here? Mara frowned, feeling the weight of the situation. The storm outside was getting worse. The alien forces they had barely escaped were still out there, somewhere. If they didn't find a way to fix the Resolute soon, they would never make it off this planet. The message, though, changed everything. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever this object was, it was connected to their future. We need to take this back to the ship, Mara said, her voice steady. We need to understand this. If this is a signal, we need to know what it means and if it's a real warning. The team packed up quickly, carefully taking scans and notes before heading back to the Resolute. The storm raged around them, but their spirits were lifted by the discovery. For the first time in days, the crew felt like they had a purpose beyond mere survival. There was a chance that whatever lay ahead, humanity had found something that could help them survive. When they returned to the ship, the object was placed in a secure lab. Leon and his team immediately began their analysis. The strange glow from the object flickered as the team worked, and the signal seemed to grow stronger, almost as if the object was reacting to their presence. Talia, the communications officer, took the lead in trying to decipher the signals. Each time she attempted to analyze them, the patterns seemed to change, making it more difficult to pin down their meaning. Mara stood by, watching the team work, but she couldn't help but wonder how much time they had left. They needed more than just a signal. They needed to get the ship fixed. Fast. 2 days passed without significant progress. The ship's repairs continued, but with the limited resources they had, there was little hope of completing them in time. Mara could feel the weight of the decision she had to make pressing down on her. Should they focus entirely on repairing the fleet, or was it time to take a risk and investigate the alien technology they had uncovered further? Leon's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Captain," he said, his tone urgent, "you need to see this." Mara stepped into the lab, where Leon stood over the object, now connected to a series of computers. The glow had intensified, and the symbols etched into the walls of the chamber appeared on the monitors, flashing faster than before.
"We're getting closer," Leon said. This isn't just a message."
"It's a map." "A map?" Mara repeated, confused.
"Yes," Leon said, nodding. "It's showing us locations. Coordinates." He pointed to the screen where several dots appeared, each marked with a symbol that seemed to correspond with the ones they had seen in the ruins. Mara felt a spark of hope.
"Locations for what?" "I'm not sure yet," Leon admitted, but his voice held a note of excitement. "But I think it's showing us places where we can find the materials we need to fix the ship."
"We've been looking for parts to repair the engines, but I think these coordinates lead to exactly what we need," Talia added. "The signal seems to be guiding us toward a specific area on the planet. It's not random. It's like the object knows exactly what we need." Mara looked at the map and the coordinates. The locations weren't far, just a few days' journey at most. They were marked with symbols she couldn't understand, but the message was clear. This could be their chance to gather the parts they so desperately needed. "We go," Mara said, her voice firm. "We don't have time to waste. We'll send a small team to gather what we need, and we'll keep the Resolute ready for liftoff. Once we have the parts, we can repair the ship and leave. We'll take a risk, but it's the only one we have left." The team, energized by the captain's decision, immediately began preparations for the journey. They knew that every moment counted, and there was no time for hesitation. They would travel to the first set of coordinates, hoping that the map was real and that the technology they had discovered was the key to saving them. As Mara watched her crew prepare, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided by something greater than themselves. Was it a higher power? Was it the aliens who had left the technology behind? Or was it simply humanity's will to survive, pushing them forward despite the odds? Mara didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. They weren't alone. Whether it was a message from the past or a strange twist of fate, the crew of the Resolute had found hope again, and as long as they had hope, they would keep fighting. Fighting for their lives, for their future, and for the survival of humanity. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Mara and her crew were ready to face whatever came next. They had nothing left to lose. The next few days were filled with urgency. The storm outside had not let up, but inside the Resolute the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the mission ahead. The coordinates provided by the mysterious alien object seemed to promise a chance, a way to gather the parts needed to repair the ship and leave this hostile planet behind. Time was running out, and every second counted. Captain Mara Vasquez walked through the hallways, checking on each team, making sure that everyone had a clear task. The crew, although weary and worn from days of hard labor, had a new sense of purpose. They knew this mission could be their only shot at survival. Hope, once a distant memory, now burned brighter than ever. The plan was simple. A small team would set out to the first location on the map. They would return with whatever parts they could find. Then they would begin the final push to repair the ship. Mara had insisted on keeping the mission small. Too many people could slow them down, and the journey would be dangerous. The terrain was unknown, and the alien signals still lingered in the background, threatening to complicate things further. Mara selected her team. Leon Park, the chief engineer, who could make sense of whatever they found. Talia, the communications officer, who could keep them in contact with the Resolute, and a few soldiers who would protect the group from whatever dangers the planet might hold. The rest of the crew would continue their work on the ship, ready to launch as soon as the repairs were complete. The team set out early in the morning, making their way across the rocky landscape. The wind howled, and the rain seemed never-ending, but they pressed on. The journey was difficult, the terrain uneven and treacherous. It took hours to reach the first location marked on the map. The closer they got, the more the landscape changed. The rocky plains gave way to something more structured. An ancient building, half buried in the ground. As they approached, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She couldn't explain it, but there was something about the structure that felt alive, as if it were aware of their presence. The air grew thick with tension, and the team moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. The structure appeared to be a large domed building, covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the storm's dim light. The door to the building was half open, as if it had been waiting for them. The team hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The interior was dark and quiet. As they moved deeper into the structure, their flashlights revealed walls lined with more symbols and patterns, similar to the ones they had seen in the alien ruins. But there was something new here. The walls seemed to shift as they moved, almost like the space itself was alive. The air inside was heavy, and every footstep echoed eerily in the silence. Leon led the group, his hands moving over the walls, tracing the symbols. "This place, it's not just a building," he said quietly. "It's some kind of repository, a storage space for technology." "These symbols!" He stopped, his voice catching. "They're instructions." "Instructions for how to use whatever is in here." Mara's heart raced. This was more than they had hoped for. The ancient building wasn't just a place of unknown origin. It was a storehouse of alien technology, the key to their survival. They moved deeper into the building, and soon they came upon a large chamber at its heart. In the center of the room, lying on a pedestal, was an object. It was unlike anything they had seen before. It pulsed with a faint blue light, and its shape seemed to shift with every movement of the light. It was both familiar and alien at once, as if it had been made for them but was still beyond their understanding. "This is it," Leon said, his voice filled with awe. "This is what we've been looking for." Talia stepped forward, scanning the object with her equipment.
"It's not just a part," she said. "It's a power source, a clean, stable energy core."
Mare's eyes widened. They had found what they needed. Not just parts to repair their ship, but the power to make the repairs last, the energy to get them off this planet. The Resolute could be fixed. They could leave. But as she took a step forward, something changed. The room seemed to shift around them, the walls closing in, and a low hum filled the air. The object on the pedestal glowed brighter, its light blinding in its intensity. The team froze, unsure of what was happening. Before anyone could react, the voice they had heard before echoed in the room, low and calm. "You have found it. Now you must decide." Mara's heart pounded in her chest. "Decide what?" "Take it."
"Use it!"
"But know this, it will change everything. The path ahead will not be easy. The power to escape this planet comes at a cost." Leon's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? What cost?" The voice did not answer directly. Instead, the blue light of the object flickered and dimmed, and the symbols on the walls began to change. The patterns, once orderly, now twisted and turned in on themselves. It was as if the building itself was trying to warn them. "We cannot stay here forever," Talia said, breaking the silence.
"The ship needs this power. We need this power."
Mara nodded, her mind racing. She had no choice. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. She stepped forward, reaching out for the object, her hand trembling. She knew the risks, but she also knew the cost of doing nothing. The crew's survival depended on this moment. As her fingers brushed against the object, the light flared, filling the chamber with an overwhelming brightness. The hum grew louder, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving only silence. The object was now in their possession. They had what they needed to escape. But what would happen next? Mara wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. Humanity had always survived by taking risks, by fighting through the unknown, and they would keep fighting, no matter what came next.